think, yes, we should just go, because we have a panel of quite a few people, and I'm looking forward to hear all about them. And I was already warning a few. I'm going to be a bit sort of keeping an eye on time, but do it gently. So just nudge you when there's about 2 minutes left. So we have also a participant who is joining us from Jadro online, because she could unfortunately not be here on site. And yeah, let me shortly introduce this panel without using too much of our time, trying to keep it concise and to just give a short introduction primarily of what you're working on, because that's what the focus is. So we're really looking here in this panel 3 on fostering place and space for marginalized belongings again, and we really focus on innovative belongings of creating, maintaining, but also, I would say, providing for space for people. And I think what is quite central in all of your presentation is accessibility, making sure that people have access to space in different ways. And you all give examples of different ways of doing that. So I think it will be interesting also to see what are the different approaches that can be used to do this in a rather international panel. So we have Peter next to me, who is part of the team of Toplo Centrala. I heard relatively recently, but I'm so glad you could be here. Toplo Centrala is based in Sofia, so in Bulgaria, quite close to the region, and is really meant to transform a former heating plant, so it's an old plant factory of the National Palace of Culture in Sofia, into a new space for artists, organizations, but also to create workshops and events that brings in people from the city center to this space. We have Leah and Carole, who came all the way from Brussels here, from the organization of Toestand in Brussels, and it's a bilingual, but I thought, that's because of its French-Dutch connections in the actual setting. Non-profit organization which exists since 2012, which is really specializing in the temporary use of unused surfaces, and again, making space accessible, which is not used in the context of Brussels. Then we have Luka, the utter, what is it, right of me, from Magacen in Belgrade. You have been one of the co-founders of Magacen, so being there from the early start when it was raised, which was really meant to be a self-organized, self-managed space, which actually used the former warehouse space in Belgrade. So also a space that was left, and thinking of how can we make this an open space for everyone, according to certain models. Then we have on the online, we can't see them now. I'll try to open it up later when they do their presentation. We have Jasmina Bilalovikj, who is located here in Skopje, part of the cultural center Jadro, which is a public institution in the field of culture that has been really established on the principles of civic-public partnership. So in that sense, they really use that approach to create the center they represent, also to serve the needs of the community in Skopje. So I think we have different examples of the creation of accessible open spaces in different landscapes. So I'll give the word here to Peter, who will tell us all about Toplo Centrala.
Thank you very much for providing me with this opportunity to present our project. So I guess everyone can hear me okay. I see you're a bit closer today than yesterday. So what is Toplo Centrala? Well, this curious Bulgarian word, as we already said, it means a power plant, a heating power plant. And it was a building built in the 80s, which only functioned for around 2 or 3 years, and then it was abandoned. And for a really long time, it just stood there, basically being forgotten about. So Toplo Centrala, beyond Toplo Centrala, is our idea to show not only what the capacity of the structure and the place in the building itself is beyond its material value, but also to express this idea that the concept of Toplo Centrala as a new type of center for arts and culture in Bulgaria is what can take the whole place further and establish some modern practices. So the origin of the idea, way back 2014, actually the origin is even further back in the past, because Toplo Centrala is based around the independent arts, the independent scene of Bulgaria, which kind of started to consolidate around the time when Bulgaria had its application for joining the European Union, but still it was relatively weak at that point. But what happened in 2014 was actually a coincidence of lucky events which brought about the realization of Tupul Centrala as such, because in 2014 Sofia was preparing its application for European Capital of Culture. However, Sofia did not win, another city in Bulgaria won, which makes it even more important that our project carried on and still got the support. So because Sofia was preparing its application, the local authorities, the municipality, recognized that we have to accommodate some of these modern practices, and it would be a good idea to look into renovating an old building and giving it away for a space for art and culture. So we would make our application more visible and establish Sofia as a place of modern cultural practices. The other lucky coincidence that happened in 2014 was that IATM, which probably most of you know is one of the biggest networks for contemporary performative arts, held a big meeting in Sofia. And so a team, a citizen association, back then they established a citizen association named Tupul Centrala. They put forward 3 ideas about different locations which could be used and transformed into a modern type center like this. So this really is a grassroots initiative in the sense that it all came from recognizing the need of the independent arts and artists to have their own space, to have their own hub, to have a place where they can practice, perform, stage their plays. And this then was took up to the authorities, and luckily the time was just right and the conditions were just right to take this project further. So, oh no, you cannot really see much, but I have 2 photos here showing this one is probably a little bit better. The red arrow points the location of Tupul Centrala, which is actually something I want to talk more about, because it is positioned in the city center. And at that time, when the municipality recognized the need to give up some of these old buildings to be transformed into a cultural center, they came up with 5 ideas from their side, which they gave to the association. And some of them were old train stations, some of them were old warehouses, and the 5th one was Tupul Centrala. But at the day where the work group was supposed to visit all the places, Tupul Centrala was actually not shown. It was the last place, and at the end of the day they said, oh, we don't have time now, we should be going. So they didn't show it at first, but luckily the work group insisted, because this place really is the best of all the other opportunities, because it really is in the center. It's surrounded from all sides with neighborhoods, and it's it really makes it possible to involve as much of the cultural life in Sofia in one place, which is accessible to everyone. But it's also a really interesting neighborhood as well, which I'm going to talk a bit more about in a minute. So the decision came about to transform this old building, and here you can see some photos of what the original building used to be, and the graffiti there says Center for Arts. So this is like the public telling the state that, you know, we want this to be something else, to be transformed. The working group established a model for a center. They came to a model that for a center, a hybrid center for performative, visual, and musical arts, and then this was put forward to the municipality. And luckily at that time, the mayor of Sofia recognized this initiative as important for the development of the city, and also for the image, the cultural image of the city. So yeah, they continued with the application of the project. And I've brought out some more pictures of another side of the building. Again with graffiti saying art, culture, and so on and so on. And yeah, this is the inside of the building. And the most important thing which brought about the success of this project, because this really is a first for Bulgaria and for Sofia, is that from the very beginning, the Citizen Association wanted everything to be very public, to have a good media coverage, to work openly with artist groups, with foreign experts, with domestic experts, and for the whole thing to be coordinated with the municipality at all times. And as you know, this trend for transforming old industrial space in Europe is nothing new. So we had the opportunity to take a lot of inspiration from other places in Europe. Mainly, we took inspiration from Knežević, which is one of Ljubljana's most important centers for urban art, and also Lulu Unique, excuse my my terrible French, but which is also an old biscuit factory in France, and actually the director of this center, Patrick Girard, I think. He was one of the international experts who helped advise and coordinate the plan for Tupul Centrala. So from 2014, the plan was initiated, like dealings with the government began, and 2020 began the actual reconstruction of the building. Finished just recently, the end of 2021. But perhaps the most important thing that came about just at the end was that Tupul Centrala was initially, at the beginning, it was planned as a cultural center for the municipality, for Sofia. But then, just at the end of 2021, talks with the Ministry of Culture began to transform it, to give it a higher rating as a regional cultural center, which gives it access to more funding directly from the Ministry of Culture, and also gives it the role to coordinate cultural activity with the neighboring municipalities, which is something that we really look forward to, but it's also a big responsibility. So the result now of 2022 officially is that we have a fully equipped Center for Contemporary Arts, a state-funded institution, but with a twist, as I will explain, which is meant primarily as a secure hub for the independent arts. Because the trouble is that before the arrival of this center, the independent arts had no one place where they could have the certainty that they will be able to perform, practice, and everything like that, because they tried working with state theaters, but the situation is complicated there because they're most interested in selling tickets, which by a quote, by some regulations, gives them funding. And there are not a lot of different places like this which have just the material capacity to host such performances. So we are a state-funded institution in that we get our funding from the municipality of Sofia and from the Ministry of Culture. But however, with this special regulation from the Ministry of Culture, it gave us the opportunity to internalize our income, and 90% of the income that Tupul Centrala generates will be used back in Tupul Centrala at our own decision. So this really gives us the freedom to be able to execute a lot of the projects which we want at our own will. So just a quick overview of what the building looks now from the inside. This is the main stage where most of the events will be hosted. The black cube is the secondary stage, a little bit smaller, and this is the stage that will be always free for independent performances and artists. We also have a gallery room, which has already scheduled quite a few exhibitions by different artists throughout the year. We have a workshop studio, and last but not least, we have also a bar, which is Tupul Centrala will be the first cultural institution to run its own bar and cafe, which is also a precedent for some reason in Bulgaria. And we have this small outdoor theater, which will hopefully we make good use of in the summer months. But the thing is about Tupul Centrala, which is one of the difficulties we have to overcome, is that it really is, like Francesca said yesterday, it is an urban void in a lot of, in a sense, because when it was built at the edge of the park, like we saw earlier, I won't roll back to the pictures, but it was concealed from the public eye by 2 artificial hillsides and also by trees from the other side. So it really is a concealed place. And after it fell into disuse, because it was into disuse so long, the public really forgot about that place. And even right now, because this project has been in the works for so long, when I tell somebody, you know, I work at Tupul Central, and people are like, yeah, I've heard about this, but where are you based? And I try to explain the location. They're like, I don't really think there's anything there. So this is something we have to overcome, because we're in the city center, but a lot of people still don't know about this location because it's difficult to perceive just visually. And also the thing is, this neighborhood is mostly of big panel buildings, mostly of elderly people which are retired. And so one of our goals, obviously working with marginalized groups, is also to try and include this, this percentage of the population, because often when we think of marginalized groups, we think of minorities and groups which are often neglected, but actually the elderly population in Bulgaria is not a minority, it's actually becoming a majority. And it's often the population which is most neglected in these cultural practices, and they don't have any information of what's going on, and there's no efforts really to include them in the cultural narrative and of what's happening with the capital and how the city is transforming. And we have set this as our mission to change this model. So our main goals: support mainly the independent artists and performers, diversify the cultural scene in Sofia, which we have already started to do, because we have lots of foreign artists coming to stage plays. We have lots of workshops between Bulgarian and foreign artists. And we also want to include as many people as we like, and that's the problem with visibility, because we want this center to be open in every sense of the word, both physically, visually, and in the sense of culture, because we want people to just come in from all around, have free access, be able to join conversations, discussions, different round tables, visit even for free small concerts and plays. And yeah, this really is the whole thing is a precedent for the Bulgarian cultural scene, and we'll see just now how it starts to transform everything. But because it's been so long in the making, it's been so anticipated by all the artists of the independent scene. We already have a full schedule for the summer. So yeah, we think we're going off on the right foot. And lastly, I want to mention that also a small part of the building is designated as a residential center, which really enables us to have guest performers there, because it's really the first cultural building that has its own residential center in Bulgaria, and this gives us a lot of flexibility to be able to invite people to stay. So yeah, this is where we are so far, and hopefully you will see more of us as time goes on, and hopefully we will do collaborations. So yeah, this is it from me. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
For also, I think, a rather optimistic story, although
Yes.
we might have to remove some hills,
Yeah,
some
yeah.
artificial hills, but I think it's an excellent example of how a space comes to life. So thank you for that.
So we'll start with a little video to put you in the mood of the project.
This is Hanna.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for having us. We are really happy to be here and also to be able to represent our organization as a more younger generation of the workers of our organization, so it's really a pleasure. This is my colleague, Carole. Maybe you would.
I'm Carole, and I work for the organization only from last October, and I'm part of the technical team. Work with the technical team, so building and maintaining the buildings we have, also close to being social worker, a bit all around.
And I've been a volunteer since the start of the organization. 2012 was the start. 2014 I started being a volunteer, and now I'm project coordinator of one of the projects of Toestand. So voilà, it's mainly youth work, social work, and coordination of one of our projects. So, like Leske introduced very well, Toestand is a bilingual-based organization in Brussels, which grew quite a lot since 2012. Today we have more than 5 different projects. With projects I mean different location, buildings, temporary occupations where we actively do a project. We have more than 15 employees. Most of them are working 4 or 5. And most of the employees are either youth worker, social worker, or project coordinator, or of the technical team. So that's mainly the workers we have. In addition to the staff, we have more than 100 of volunteers, more than 200 partners, which can be one person or bigger collectives of citizens based in Brussels. And what we do concretely, what our mission is really to facilitate temporary occupation in Brussels before, so looking for the occupations and looking for the buildings, during the building, and also after, in a reflection of the city, the changing of the city, consulting with the new projects that are going to be when the building we had is going to be teared down for a new project, so before, during, and after. And our second mission is to do permanences. We call it's just moments in the week in our different locations where we are open to all and where we really accompany and are with the people that come into the doors of the projects. So that's our 2 big missions, basically. So that's part of the team. So our core, what's our heart, like what do we really love and what is really important? It's the reactivation of forgotten or abandoned buildings, terrains, public spaces by means of temporary and autonomous social-cultural centers in dialogue with creation, with autonomy and action. It's really important to emphasize the action part. I think we are the opposite of theorizing. Our vision and our way of working is we do, and after we evaluate, we think of went it well, when it didn't, it went well. And it's a constant progress of self-criticizing our work, like working with the people, dialoguing, feeling the needs of the people, and not being with a vision when we start working on a project. So that's very important, and it's also how Toestand started. So basically it was 2 drunk friends that wanted to organize parties, you know, and they were looking for empty buildings, and they squatted a building, an old school, and they were like, whoa, it's amazing what we can do with just squatting a building. They got a permit to stay in that school for a bit of time and organize stuff there, and then we got another big proposal for a project, and that was the start of the organization. Afterwards, we started having another reflection on, Brussels is a place where there is as much empty space as the biggest commune, the biggest so you have the region with different commune, little municipalities in Brussels, and there is as much temporary space than the biggest commune of Brussels. So a lot of empty spaces, a lot of empty offices, a lot of empty buildings, but it was not our main goal in the beginning of creation of Toestand, where there is so much empty space, we need to use that space. It was more, we want to do something, and then the reflection started, and we started theorizing our work, we started theorizing the vision of the city, why we think it's so important to do something with those empty buildings. The core of why we do the temporary occupations, it's really to give space, to be able to let spaces be reappropriated by the people who don't find place in other places of the city. So it's all marginalized that are not part of the financial location market, that can't rent, that, but also that don't feel welcome linguistically, culturally, that feel left out, that feel shy, that feel that don't have the tools to go and find a building. So all of those aspects we take into account in our project, and it's really the core of our work. We only do and start a project when we feel that there is a will of the neighborhood and a need of the neighborhood. Otherwise, we will never start a project, and and that is also how we continue the project. If you feel like at one point we started temporary occupation, we have, for example, 4 years of that temporary occupation before the temporary occupation goes down, and we feel that there is no need anymore, that the people are not there, that it's not used, we stop. We will not continue putting energy with something that's not needed by the people around us. So that's a bit of a core. We have some basic principles. Yes, yeah, the PowerPoint is just... we have some basic principles.
We forgot a picture.
You
just don't see it.
So the basic principles is, besides being just inclusive, non-racist, all the just basic human respect things, it's really, like I said, the needs and the will of the local community. We don't theorize our work, our approach, or the people we are working with. We try to go with the flow of the dynamics that are organic and natural in the spaces. We try to constantly reevaluate our approaches depending on really the needs of the space users. So every day we change. Every day what we do, what we put out, what we work on, how we work, every day it changes. So we have like this quote that we always say, people that are there are always the right people. We don't go looking for an expert or another one to do something. For example, if people are there and they want to do an exhibition, it's the people that are there that are the most perfect ones to do this exhibition. We don't go to look for external artists to fill in a gap of an empty wall of the place. It's the people that are there that are fitted for it. And we don't question that, never. Yeah, it's the doers that decide. We just are there to facilitate, to put the space open, but it's the people that are going to do something, that are going to do the project, that decide what they want to do. There are almost no rules or no barriers, except the basic human respect basis that I don't need to explain, I think. So the organizational, when I say no rules, organizational spaces that we use, we can break everything, rebuild everything. So every wall, every chair, everything you find can be broken and rebuilt. No problem. More times a day if needed. All the buildings we use, we really try to emphasize the fact that all of those buildings will be torn apart. They will be broken down. So we only go to places where we can experiment to the fullest level. We have a super opportunity of a building, but it's protected, for example, like you cannot touch those windows or you cannot touch the door. We will not go because it doesn't make sense for us. And it doesn't enable our public and the people that choose the spaces to be free. If we need to check all the time, oh, you cannot touch that, then we already lose an accessibility then it's already a barrier more to open all possibilities. So that's very important. Everything is possible. Also, I will explain it. Also financially, so we have more than 20 different envelopes, subsidies that go from municipal, regional, foundations. It's a big organization with a lot of money. I cannot lie, today we have a lot of financial support, but 20 different seems so much, and actually it is a lot of work, a lot of proposals, but we try to have little envelopes with a lot of freedom, and not have big subsidies that will block and constrain us while working. So of course it's way more work, it's a bigger development, but it gives us the possibility to switch budget from project to project, to pay a youngster that is doing so much, and at one point we are like, oh, you want to really do a workshop, or you will really, okay, we'll pay you a bit to be able to develop that. And that means that we are just also free with how we use the money and our relationship to the institution. I will develop this later, but we really love being in a gray zone, always in a gray zone. Of course, we are dependent on the political and the financial aspects, but we want to be able to keep as autonomous as possible, even if it takes us way more work in administrative stuff or looking for money, organizing fundraising, and doing all those little things that enable us to be free. And especially, it's not us, it's for the public, for the people, for the citizens. We want to be able to say to a youngster that comes in, you want to organize a party? Okay, here you have 200 euros, you can buy food, drinks, you can rent material, let's go, we do it. And we don't think too much. Well, that's basically the thing. It's also linguistically super important. Most of our workers speak different languages. There is not one imposed language in a meeting. We always try to make sure that everybody can be themselves, speak in the language they want to speak, come how they are, and that they don't feel a pressure to need to adapt themselves to be able to be part or going to the places we open. So that's very important. Culturally too, Brussels is so diverse. We have one of the cities with the most different nationalities in whole Europe. That's the same thing. Everybody with his own religion, background, cultural difficulties also need to be welcome. Like if you were super drug consumer and drugged, you're as well as welcome as a university clean guy that comes sitting in the building. Everybody is welcome, and we find that through that everybody creates a mutual respect. And of course sometimes there are problems, but we evaluate and we don't fix rules of people that are welcome or not welcome. We evaluate while doing the projects. And for the user, it's the same. So everything we do is free, or free contribution. That means that we have a lot of partners that organize activities. Sometimes they don't have personal funds. They do it freely and voluntarily. So they do a pot of free contributions. Everybody that comes in, if you want to put 2 euros, you put 2 euros. If you don't want, you don't have, you don't put. It's no pressure, but it enables the people to have something out of what they organize. No? It's important for us not to put that also as a possibility. So yeah, like I said, it's super important for us to carefully trace the gray zone. It means carefully because we don't want to expose ourselves. We are lucky to have today a political recognition money to do stuff. We have also more and more really the municipalities that come to, hey, we have an empty building. Do you want to take that building and reappropriate it? And that's a luxurious way of working because we don't need to look anymore that much as we used to. But we want to stay in the gray zone. And if we feel the need to transcend certain rules, even to go illegal, because it responds to the needs of the people around us, of the neighborhoods, of the people, we will do it. So we have a formal organization which does the legal things, and then we also are a support for illegal practices in our city because we think it's the only way to go forward, and if it's not possible in places like us, where is it possible? So we also have housing for refugees, we open squats for refugees, we organize big action in public spaces, we organize raves, all those kinds of things where we support really for now. We don't ask ourselves, is it legal to support or not? We ask ourselves, is it needy to support it? If it's needy, we will support it in our vision. That's basically it. So we have a lot of different projects today. So it's a bit of a shitty map. Voila. So Bistek Bis, it's an old kind of parking in a popular neighborhood of Brussels. Today it's with different partners. There are parties. 2 minutes. Yeah, we are not ready. What? 2 minutes. Okay, I will just go.
It's okay.
Biestebroek bis. So Korenbeek, it's an old school, mostly for elderly people and very young people. That's our public there. So Allée du Quai, it's the biggest occupation. It's 3 big hangars, 1 external place, and voilà. We have Rater, that's a project in the public space where we put this frit barak. So we put a frit thing in the public space, but Carole will explain the project later. French fries. French fries house. And then in Limbo we have the biggest Recup. It's a platform of reusable material, Recup, with more than 300 partners, and it's an online platform and a physical hangar where people can go get stuff and bring stuff. And it is very big now today. You have all kinds of materials, from really building materials to just paintings to everything. It's like a big bazaar, and that enables us also to do all of our projects, because we have all the material you can imagine, through wood, metal, everything in Limbo. Voilà. And then we have also moving projects, like for example, this is a, I don't know how you say it, but in the sea side, the kitty cats that you use at the sea, we made a mobile radio with it. So that's a radio that goes into, when it's marches, manifestations, we go with the radio, we make live radio in the public spaces with the people that need to talk about some important subjects, no?
Just take.
Okay. Okay.
Subtle steering.
So I will explain 2 of them. Yeah, we can change this. Okay, it's Allée du Quai. So I will explain 2 of our projects. One big one, the biggest one that's there since 8 years, Allée du Quai, and another one only recently, I would say the smallest one. So Allée du Quai has started in 2014. It's in the northern part of Brussels. It's 9,000 square meters and consists of 3 hangars and a big outside garden, grass pelouse. It is different kind of things. It's as well a youth center, as a neighborhood place, as a big inside public space, a big garden, skate park, all in one. And depending on the activities, it changes a bit. The public that comes to Allée du Quai is also very diverse. We always say, it's like the whole world passes there, and it's quite literally. You have kids, punks with dogs, you have families, you have refugees, because you have a park very close by where refugees kind of live. You have hipsters, of course, and you have, they always find their way to. Youngsters, skaters, name it up, old lonely people that come, drunk people. You have really the whole world that passes, that finds a way to connect to this place. And then next to the public that comes and visits and uses the place, you have the partners, as already mentioned. And partners is like the collaborations with fixed partners that come like every Tuesday. For example, Tai Chi, they come every Tuesday and Wednesday doing Tai Chi lessons. And then partners for one moment, one activity. And it's different to say how much partners we have. We could say like hundreds and even more in time. And so concretely, Allée du Quai is used 7 days on 7. It is used, it's not open, it's differently. So every day in the week, one of the partners uses the space. And which is important with this is that all different spaces are with locks, with codes, which means that if you're a partner, you will get the codes to go to your place you will need. And then you have like, it's 7 on 7 used, but we are open. We do permanences 2 times a week. And this means we're open to all kind of public. And so Lea already explained, but permanences is like, we're just open. We serve coffee, tea to free contribution. There's music, there's ping pong to play, there's just people, and the main thing is just to meet people from, as I said, backgrounds that otherwise you would never encounter. Like, will be a punk with a dog talking to a little girl who is drawing. You have like these special encounters.
And also with partners, you become a partner, it's one meeting. So it's one meeting, you explain your project. If it's in our core, you get a key to a lock or you get a code. It's very, very accessible.
And we evaluate after the first time you did an activity. Yes, this is the idea. What is also nice to say about Aledukai is like every day is different. There will always happen something small or big, like for example, a friend calls me and says like I have a big recoup of veggies, so we cook. And another example, it happened in November. I arrived at my work there and there was 32 boxes on the pallets with in each box 320 eggs, which is 11,560 eggs something. And we made pancakes and cakes and omelets like for 2 weeks for the neighborhoods, and we bought pancakes to the park with the refugees, and it happens. You cannot explain. It was a donation of an egg farmer. Voila, and then you have a lot of examples of this. So every day is different, which is also due to the different public that comes there. And with what comes there, we do an activity, which is like making pancakes, for example. Also for me, and one of the strengths of this project is a lot of people know this place as Aledukai, but don't necessarily know toestand, which I think is very important because the place exists in itself, has its own identity. And I think this is a bit the aim in every project, is that the place like kind of emerge and create its own identity, and that the organization behind is mostly to facilitate. And
it's not about us.
It's never about us. And in Aledukai, in this example, when I talk about it, it's like toestand, I don't know, Aledukai, yes, of course, the skate place, or where there's these events or these events. Voila, and it's 1 year left. Afterwards, it will be thrown down after 8 years. Initially, it was only 3 years, always 1 year more. So now we say 1 year, who knows? We don't believe it anymore, but and it will become a public park, which is a good thing, but I mean, you can discuss about this. The second example is Rotter. We're here since February, so it's very recent. It's totally different scale. So we had the opportunity with toestand to do a project in popular neighborhoods. It's Anderlecht, poorly invested, otherwise in public space. And the aim of the project is like create a kind of community feeling between people. Okay, the place is, sorry, I forgot to say, it's a social housing block with the parking, and this parking will be transformed in a public space. And the idea was to create a kind of, inclusive community of the inhabitants of as well the social block, as the park users next to the parking, as the close-by neighborhoods. For this project, we had no infrastructure, so we're like, okay, how we will do this? At the same time, we had an echo of an abandoned fry stand.
With In Limbo, the platform
the platform of free and recuperated materials. And then we're like, okay, let's just combine these two. It took us 3 months to find a company that was crazy enough to want to transport this stand, because it's big and it's like fragile, so it was a special transport thing. We very quickly realized this. It's like February 2, 3, 4 February, we transported the barack, the fry stands, from like, I don't know, 3 kilometers further to this place. We cleaned it, we
just put it, with the truck.
Yeah, with the truck, and we put it, and actually we did it really together with the people that passed there, because actually the place where we put it, you have the social housing block, the parking, and next to it a park, and a lot of people pass there anyway to go do shopping, to go to their work, but there's nothing there else, and so we put it really in the center of a crossroad of a lot of people. And in these 3 days that we relocated and cleaned out this barack, like a lot of people passed by and just started helping, because we immediately, I mean, you cannot look next to it, and people that had time helped like cleaning, even like for 5 minutes or whatever. And after the 3rd day, we did an inauguration with fries. Also this, I mean, very quickly and only with mouth-to-mouth information. We didn't do like an event on social media or anything. It was really like for the neighborhood, and when people passed, they would look mostly like interested and not like, what are you doing? Because as this fry stand is like a language you know. It's not like a trendy wooden construction you build. It's like people, you have already seen a fry stand in Belgium anyway.
But that's very important. We don't try to be fancy.
It's really this, like using language that already is like
Common.
And so this is the fact for, I mean, yeah, there's other pictures maybe to show.
Yes.
And so the idea with this stand is to have like a tangible and real place where you can create this social cohesion between people. And since we put this stand there, we open every Wednesday, we do permanences. And it's as easy as this. We put out 2 big tables, 2 big benches, 4 big benches. We serve coffee, tea for free. This is also crazy how people nearly don't believe it's for free, but this is really the core, and that attracts a lot of people, of course, because elsewhere in the city everything is
Not free.
Not free. And it's coffee, tea, music. We put out papers and pencils, and it's so crazy. I really didn't think it, but every generation starts drawing, as well as the cool youngsters, as the kids, as the elder people. To me, it's crazy, and people draw together on a drawing. Someone starts, and now we're in the part that it's more about creating social cohesion. And then I think in April we will start to more think about what will become of the public space to think together. But now the focus is really on the people getting to know each other. I mean, yeah, I could go on details for this, but I will try not to. But it's like you have the racist old woman from the block that will have a whole afternoon talking with the youngsters with the Moroccan background, and it shifts just by putting down this table and drawing together on it. It's crazy, and I think that the basis of this project and other projects is to try this most common and simple language, which is coffee, tea, music, drawing, different languages, making portraits of people, drawing on the barack. People start drawing on the barack. Voila. And voila. I think it's okay.
Okay, it's very important to also have a critical reflection, because it's temporary occupation, so every project we start has an end. It can be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but it has an end. It's very great for our approach because it's enabling us to be totally free, to really experiment to the fullest, and also to put the fullest energy. We don't want to think because we don't have time to think. We have a limited time, so we need to do it full on and give as much as possible as we can. But it has also downsides. First, it's in neighborhoods where often there is not a lot, so we go and we leave. It's questionable because we give a lot of energy, a lot of love, a lot of everything, and then sometimes they are left behind. But through now almost 10 years of experience, almost every person that comes into our spaces during the project, they continue doing stuff. They start their own groups, they continue doing activities, they go looking for something else. So we are not often confronted with really that left behind feeling, and we keep a very strong relationship with all the people and the places we went through. So that's, I think, important to think of and still be critical. And also, just Brussels is a city with a lot of gentrification, it goes fast. And it's true that the places, we also have a lot of political liberty, because the places where we do temporary occupations are places where there are urbanistic projects for upper classes, and we also contribute to rehabilitate and give like another image to neighborhoods, and to make the neighborhoods more attractive to certain investors and to a certain social political class. So as we in our practices are the opposite, very activist, and think of the local people, we contribute to a more bigger effect. And that's something we are thinking of today in how we grow, how much we accept as projects, where we do the project, because it is problematic and it's counterproductive for the different things.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
No, I think this is very inspiring, and I think also your sort of mission to stay in the grey zone and remain autonomy links up, I think, quite well with Luka's example of what Magazine is also trying to do. So thanks a lot. And I also think the examples were very much needed to show what you're doing. So it's perfectly wonderful presentation. Thanks.
Okay, this was yes, very inspiring and in a big, very much larger scale in both sheer size but also scope that then I will talk about. But magazine is it's in a very different context. Somehow when you ended your story about the whole footprint and gentrification, magazine somehow is in many, many ways outside of the system or systems, and some are good and some are bad. I think the most honest way to think about it is like a sort of high volume illegal squat with a fluid and open bureaucracy, which might become or not clear as I explain how it came to be, because I think without coming into place in the way it did, it would be impossible actually, and I still sometimes have a suspension of disbelief that it exists as it does in Belgrade. So it was like this usual story of, it happened actually 15 years ago, and I wasn't involved, but was in the current stages, where the independent scene organized around some very relevant organizations was pushing for space to get control of programming for the independent scene, which was somehow at that time popular and still sort of in some places new. And there was this mayor and this cultural whatever person in the city who said, who saw something somewhere in Bordeaux, I think, and was like, very nice, let's do it. And I mean, this was where it stopped making too much sense, because they insisted on many problematic things. One was to have an intermediary public institution claiming wrongly that it is impossible to legally give in such a way the space to the organizations. Then they insisted to have some sort of call and to then put organizations to have also a rather short contract. Then they were supposed to fix the space according to the contract, but the contract was never signed. Then the space with many structural problems. It's a used warehouse, privately used as warehouse, around 2,500 square meters, with many problems. Even if things were solved, there started being serious problems that the organization didn't have enough office space, and there was also the problem with working with this institution, which is a pretty terrible one now, even worse than it was, the Youth Cultural Center of Belgrade. It's a very most institutions in Serbia are barely functional, and they're, which is important for the rest of the story, very closed and hard to use. You can use them if you have sort of a relevance as an artist to show things. This is not the problem, but to do everything else that comes before, it is often impossible. And this institution was preventing also the organizations that won, 6 of them that won this call, to use the space with their partners. They had to somehow always check and ask, and it made it very institutional, which was not the idea. And this all led, with or without planning from the city, that in some years, so if you move, this is now 7 years forward to 2014. Several of the organizations who were initially there moved out because it didn't fit their needs. The place became a warehouse of its own activities again. And there was never solved problems of getting more office space. Then there was a very, somehow I think, illustrative and important thing that happened. The main sewage line in the basement, which is a pretty large part of magazine, broke. And as a result, for the next 10 years, it accumulated 18 tons of human waste by magazine and its neighbors, which was solved by the city by putting plastic tape around the door to the basement. Also, quotes from the Youth Cultural Center director was, you would need €1 million to solve this. So unfortunately we don't have this, and this is this. In 2014 the city and the Youth Cultural Center, which sort of was also made into this, was saying it is too much work for us, this is not working, so please get out. And at this point the remaining organizations of Magazine invited the Association of Independent Cultural Scene of Serbia, which is like a national association of organizations of independent culture, to try and do something about it. And at this point started the process, which is somehow still a process, and I look at Magazine, I really look, maybe the most important lessons learned is that like process should be somehow ongoing, and if you have or find these ways of small ways to like have control or in governance, in organizing, to use it not in a way, okay, now we solved it and now we do, but to use it to see how you can do differently, and also importantly to use it in a way that is defined, because I think like this bureaucracy I mentioned is important, because bureaucracy is actually what provides openness, because by having ways of working written down is the way to make sure that someone can just access and read it and not have to meet me and then I explain and then you come as my this somehow we became very aware with the initial experiences that came late of different squatting practices in Belgrade, which were very damaged by this sort of thing. So in that time the association said, okay, we will try and do a public campaign and just state, okay, we will not leave, you can make us, but we will not. It was illegal anyway from the start since the contract was never signed, but now it was somehow more officially illegal. So we are moving in these different, I don't know, like symbolic levels of illegality, which was always the marking of the space. And we actually used as a starting point for the model of the new way of using Magazine, we used the model of Pogon Jedinstvo from Zagreb, because there is also a lot of collaboration between the independent scenes all over the region, and trying to use also similar models even in the legal ways, but also like experiences in organizing and what this brought as a possibility, it was from the start the prerogative to, on the one hand, have an open calendar and treat the space the way we think like public good should be treated. So make clear rules, make it as accessible to everyone, and make it accessible without priorities. From the start, the idea, I mean, as open calendar probably means anyway, is to have no selection aside from the basic one, not having their political parties, religious organizations, and different fascist stuff. But there is no like you are good art, you are bad art. We don't still go into this, and this somehow I think is very important. And what this led to, there is very little space, as I mentioned, in Serbia for, especially for pre-production, preparing, practicing. The practices in Magazine, most of it is like independent culture. There is other things that I will briefly mention later, but the practices range from a lot of contemporary dance to visual arts to small like performative and theater groups to like things that are whatever multimedia that is hard to like describe except one by one. And what has always been lacking was the space to just prepare, also office space. And what we have been doing since we decided to tell the city, okay, we will stay here, which curiously enough, without too much trouble, they did rounds like every 1 or 2 years of coming again with some eviction notice, something. Once they came like few guys, and we were there who were like coming to evict us, but we were more. It was very weird thing. There was always a public. We also had at one time when it was the last. Every time they would try to evict us, we would take sort of back another part of the space that used to be a space and then was somehow abandoned. And there was one particular moment, there was a postal worker was a secretary for culture somehow, because she was a lover of the brother of the mayor. And she was administration, and then we had some weird 6 months negotiations with her. That ended up by her explaining she will really support private galleries and this is great, and offering us to rent Magazine at an economic price. And then we said no thank you, we will stay there, and we will also take this part of the building. And she was, but did nothing, because during the whole thing, we had a lot of support by like the art scene, also parts of the academic scene, and it was somehow also in a very complex story part of the hosting place for the protest against the major development in Belgrade. Basically, a big part of the city center was given away, well, to themselves, to the administration, but officially to some Arab, builders of towns to create some mega structures for putting money in it, because no one is actually living there. So it's a major scar in Belgrade, and somehow the major protests, the first protests happening in Belgrade after many years, were being organized out of Magazine. And this is a complicated story I will not go further into, but it was kind of not opportune to kick us out just. Because it was big enough, we could present ourselves as poor young artists with nowhere to go, which is partly true. And the building also doesn't have a high economic value, which was probably one of the most important things, because it is an inner courtyard with no parking, actually one parking space, one entrance, very few windows, very hard to divide in a residential building where you couldn't do. So it would be very hard to monetize this building. And this is part of the reason this pressure from this side, from the private sector, wasn't coming, because they could solve these problems that is harder for the people in power to solve. So it would be a big front that didn't need opening. And we somehow, through years, many people in there, and coming to the number of people, many organizations were coming, and basically we were treating, except for the space, trying to somehow manage it as best as we can, and deal with it as a public good, because we recognize the ownership of the space by the public, not necessarily the city, which is the official status, but we recognize that it is not ours, which has always been important somehow inside. We were using also ourselves as resources. Magazine until today has 0 employees. The level of usage of the space in recent years is something like 20 to 30 discrete things daily. And it is like 50 to 60 regular users in organizations, and something between 150 and 300 different organizations using it yearly. So it's sort of a high volume of filtration that is propelled by basically people recognizing that it is worth it to put your own time and resources into it. So like from the 2015-16, we already came an organization called Karkatak, doing like large interactive machines and stuff, who were using the big basement that we like broke the lock and entered during the first time they wanted to kick us out as a workshop, but also as something we call a Praxa makerspace that became also like very integrated in Magazine. We are now trying to solve all these particularities, because the logic of Magazine is that no space can belong to someone. It is all common, and some spaces like the workshop cannot be done directly through open calendar, because you cannot move things out and back because it's heavy machinery. But it created like the possibility to do the work we need to do, because we didn't really have money to do the work we need to do ourselves. So we had suddenly there people who were like some sort of high-powered janitors that could do themselves plumbing, electricity, big things. And this somehow, every time we did something like this happened, somehow it created more and more capacity to have a space that within the same size somehow becomes bigger. And this led to us thinking, okay, why not, if we have this tiny problem in the basement, why not find a way to solve this? And we were like, okay, we don't have any right to this space legally, but maybe we don't care. And we started to fundraise to invest in a space we don't have any right to, and we managed. And with this, we then emptied the basement to sheet, fixed. It was actually very hard to fix the plumbing, but nothing close to €1 million. Fixed this, then created the storage in the basement, removed all the warehouse of the warehouse to the basement, created a co-working space out of some separate offices that were filled with also youth cultural center stuff. Somehow kicked out the last youth cultural center person who was somehow coming to his job for some years. It was mutual, somehow he stopped coming. And suddenly it was interesting through all these like interventions in space, but also being openly opposed to the city, who was kind of more and more back. Different people coming from very different backgrounds within tiny field, but somehow also very differing, were having ownership of the space. Not in the way of owning it, but like the belonging, if you want to use the word here. And this somehow enabled, enabled us to feel safe there. And stopped being like worrying constantly whether and how we will get kicked out. And the next thing we did, which is I think the most important, is we recognized that we have through all these different practices on figuring out how, what, when, with a lot of actually different people doing very different things, we decided to actually, coming from a very simple just model of having basically an online tool that is an open calendar, to write down the practices that we have developed. And thus became the model, which is, I can share actually a small publication we published with this model with everyone, if you're interested. Basically writing down the practices we developed. And we developed like different organizational structures and teams that are in charge for different things. We developed sort of a way to when we started getting projects, we were like, okay, maybe we can do this now. We started we still don't have employees, but we have something we call money given for volunteering, which is like still on a very small level, but we instituted an institution of a coordinator, which is something between a secretary and executive director, which is also very important in all these things. We have rotation, so like you can be a coordinator for 1 month. Currently, and this sounds like very big money to us, you get for something that looks pretty much like a full-time job these days, you get 250 euros in cash. But it started by doing 3 years for free, then 2 years for 30 euros. Then, interesting thing is in 7 years of this model, we had over 50 different coordinators. And this is very important because by being really in charge of all the communication with the outside, but also some internal things and handling stuff from this position, you actually become aware of what the thing is. And it is very hard to be aware even if you use it a lot, if you are not. And by having this rotation thing, it means that you have now 50 people, some of them are not anymore there present, but many are, who actually are aware of what this thing is. Because it is hard to figure it out. It is also changing, but there is some... And so what we went on later was to like do the other needed things to make the space better. We recently dealt with the project trying to make the space accessible to wheelchairs, so we built also the ramp on our own, like because we have also welding capabilities, and then also made the toilets accessible. And now we are doing the nice things. We are also very afraid the place will become too nice. It's not near that, but we are also having it connects to something you were saying. I mean, this is not what we want. And also one very important thing is like anything happening in the space also must be free, and any kind of usage of the space is always free. The way we can do is the city is still paying bills. I mean, they want to kick us out, but it's easier for them to pay bills than not, because if they cut electricity, we would cry the same as if they take us out with whatever policemen or tanks. So they're just paying it, but at this moment we would have capacity without a problem to cover the bills, and actually would like to do it because it would give us more of this legal game rights to the space. So I don't know, I mean, I'm open to any conversation about this. For me, it is the strangest that with this volume of people, we have right now monthly assemblies. Corona was a bit weird, obviously, as for all physical spaces, but we are now at the level of like 25 to 30, and sometimes more if there's important matters, people meeting at the monthly assemblies, which are like the highest body of decision making. As a general body, we have a mailing list, but like on monthly assemblies, it's also a very big rotation. It is not the same people every time. And for me, I just have a hard time. This actually works. And I don't know. I'm very happy. Don't know why I would stay in Belgrade if it wasn't this there. But not sure I understand why.
But it works. No, thank you, Luka. I think what I like about what you're saying. This idea, we want a safe space without worries, and I think you need to break with some of the conventions in order to do that, and it seems to work. So I think this is part of at least your contribution to this panel. We have one last person who is online.
Hello, Plasken. Hello, everybody. Hi.
I'll place you as a speaker. Yes. So feel free to start as well, Jasmina.
Yes, first of all, greetings to all, and I'm very sorry for not being able to be there with you, which is kind of absurd since you are in my city, in Skopje. I'm joining online, but you know, it's the health situation. I mean, it's regular season flu, but I'm still recovering, so I thought it's wiser and more advisable that I, you know, stay at home. Well, Artan Sadiku, the president of Jadro Association, was meant to start this presentation and give it together with me, but he is in Belgrade, and yeah, he had COVID diagnosed. He was tested and mild symptoms. He was meant to join us online, but this morning, just before the session, I got a message from him that the symptoms got worse. So I will try to cover both his part and yeah, the part that I was meant to give on operative, let's say, aspects of Centar Jadro in the past 3 years since its establishment. But since the ideological framework of the institution is on which the institution is based is very important, I will start with this text on ideological framework on which the institution is based, Social Cultural Space Centar Jadro, which is co-founded by Jadro Association of the Independent Cultural Scene and Municipality of Centar. And meanwhile, during the presentation, I will share 2 videos with you just for you to have an idea of the venue, which is again a pity that you're in Skopje and it would have been convenient for you to visit, but okay, at least you have an idea. So with the formal establishment on the 27th of April of 2012, Jadro Association of the Independent Cultural Scene initiated as one of its primary goals to work towards establishing a hybrid, non-for-profit cultural institution established on the basis of public-civic partnership. And for such an ambitious goal, Jadro found a viable partner in the municipality center in Skopje. And in March 2015, formally announced its joint cooperation towards reaching this goal with a public presentation and a debate over the concept of the future institution. And I will try to give a general overview of the idea behind the social cultural space Centar Jadro, the first of its kind in Macedonia, which after a lengthy administrative process of over 3 years, in September 2017, was registered in the Central Registry of the Republic of Macedonia as a formal institutional entity. In building the whole concept and initiative, we, and when I say we, I mean members of Jadro Association, because I am one of the founding members of Jadro Association, we were driven by the etymological value of the word culture, which implies nourishment and nurturing, further implies caring, but also developing and upgrading from within. In the context of the civil-public partnership institution, this nourishment is applied to the way cultural, political, and social-based content is used to form collaborations and actions as modes of cooperation. One of the key signs that culture is based on the premises togetherness, commons, and nurturing is the decentralization of the power of decision-making. That is exactly the most important mission of the independent cultural sector, to demonopolize the distribution of power in the sphere of the social cultural context and create ground for the collaborative and the collective notions of critically minded cultural productions to flourish. This process can further help us experience culture as a form of nourishment, a complex social practice that deals with the growth and the becoming of the aesthetic, artistic, and political articulations of everyday life and the political realities of our present times. With that, it comes as no surprise that sometimes the things we can achieve and envision collectively can surpass and exceed our individual efforts and expectations. Social Cultural Space Centar Jadro is first and foremost a collaborative initiative and the first of its kind in Macedonia. As an institutional model, it follows, similar like Magazine, the example of Pogon in Zagreb, Croatia, and it similarly too started as a result of a need for the independent art sector to have a space that will respond to the collective ideas without necessarily being particularly well suited to replace the white cube or the performance for all contemporary forms of creative production, visual arts, performance, dance, theater, to name a few. Ideologically, the institution was envisioned and ultimately constituted around the concepts of collective and communal cooperation and action, organically connecting the civil sector, the local government, and the citizen. And this kind of cooperation is not only possible, but also very much the future of sustainable cultural, social, and political inclusiveness and democracy. In the society as the North Macedonian is, we strongly and urgently need the deep reformative process of cultural institutions. And Centar Jadro is a small step in that direction, but of crucial meaning. One of the key questions has always been, what is that we want to redefine with this model? As a society with an eminent democratic core, we need to be able to see the importance of this model of institutions, thus verifying its value as critical propositions to an ever-evolving democratic and pluralistic society. With this initiative, we would like to redefine the economic, political, cultural, and other needs of the independent cultural sector, but also the functions and structures inherent in the political discourse, detecting and working on addressing the way their performances presupposes efficiency, mobility, autonomy, transparency, and decentralization, and in turn affects the greater democratic capital of society. Then, as a possible answer to the questions, we can say that we would also like to redefine the economic, political, cultural, and other needs of the sector, but also the functions and structures inherent, as I said, in the change of the political discourse, which guarantees greater democratic capital. As a place, it needs to respond to our need to freely express contemporary social, cultural practices and creative, autonomous, self-organized content that will articulate our social, intellectual, critical, and creative capital, emphasizing the idea of commons and direct relation between culture, art, and other social strata. Furthermore, Centar Jadro will continue to show a stable and autonomous development and a physical space in the material structure of the city as an important and new neuralgic point of the critical cultural production in the city and the wider national context. It also plays an extremely important role on symbolic level, that is in the production and communication of meanings, a place circulating the dynamic change of social and political flows evident in the ideas it will welcome in its loosely curated public programs. The new model of the institution we proposed is important for cultural development, but also for education, the development of critical culture and the new forms of social cultural communities. This kind of an institution approaches physical space and the way of its advocacy from an aspect of diversity and inclusiveness and not uniqueness, uniformity and exclusivity. Above all, the institution promotes a new model of management which involves cooperation, togetherness and public accountability. As this model is based on the partnership between the local government and the civic society, made up of organizations, individuals and informal groups, the management is led to the preamble of a democratic governance model. With this model, there is a substantial decentralization of power and a limited capacity for the practices of political party influence. It is the only way to create organizational and program autonomy in the activities in the sphere of culture within the civil sector, but also wider. Through this format, basic resource and institutional stability is ensured, as well as participation in management. This model ensures long-term sustainability resulting from public infrastructure support on one hand and independent programming and participatory decision-making on the other. The ultimate goal of Jadro with this cooperation with the municipality is strengthening the independent cultural sector as a social sediment that exists as a network, a web that rhizomatically spreads through various relations in society in a friendly manner, entering into solidarity with other guilds and associations in the region. The independent cultural sector points to the necessity of epistemological anarchism, of openness, which means deleting the borders between each binary opposition and drawing the margins of some different models of action, which imply a great deal of courage courage and alertness. One of the most important traces of the independent cultural sector is the opening of broader horizons in terms of reading culture. The difference in the part of the civic sector that operates in culture, called an independent cultural sector, is a specific field of political, theoretical, artistic, and activist action, which encompasses the wider social cultural context, striving for its demonopolization and depolitization. It can be distinguished by clearly defined criteria subdivided into two segments, at the organizational level and at the content level. It is an interdisciplinary way of acting and organizing its activities and contents, which are mainly hybrid and articulated in the public space by building new roads in cultural practices. Centar Jadro is dreamed, designed as a dynamic nucleus which aims to become a point of development of critical culture dedicated to the wider social needs. Its programs, which is open for the artists, cultural workers, but to community as well, creates a scenery through which the Centar Jadro can be recognized as a driving force in the dynamization of the whole cultural production, with a great emphasis on the development processes of cultural policies. The independent cultural sector in its whole and the social cultural space Centar Jadro itself as well is recognized as a space for new models of cultural production and intersectorial cooperation. It features organizational dynamism and flexibility, and above all, direct engagement and action in the community, as well as wider understanding of the space and the notion of culture. Characteristic is the simultaneous action in all segments of the social cultural context, in different spheres of culture and cultural policies, and mutual creative connection, whereby the characteristic of wider social awareness and orientation towards building new modern policies in the different segments of culture is exceptionally present and dominant in art and society, both on a theoretical and activist level. As I said, this kind of institution is the first one of its kind in North Macedonia, which is recognized as a mobilizing social and political nucleus, which differs from specialist-oriented cultural institutions. Characteristics of Centar Jadro and the content level is the integration of contemporary art in all activities, popular culture, contemporary theory, new media and technologies in terms of content and organization, specific forms of education for acting in the social cultural context, promotion of ideological models, critical and developmental contemporary cultural policies, and continuous monitoring and implementation of contemporary trends and debates in culture and art related to the new social theories, as well as the reading of the term culture. On the road to construction of a new model of installation, European and regional experiences show exceptional success in both the content and the management concept of this model of hybrid institution. In short, here are the characteristics of such institutions: decentralized model of management and decision-making, involvement in the professional sector in building the policies of the institution, enabling community program participation. The program of such institution is created on the basis of cooperation, expert interaction, expert consultation with a large number of individuals and organizations, and it's an outcome interaction between several stakeholders, perspectives, and creative conflicts. They are managed in a manner that is adapted to the principles of cooperation. Their spaces are an infrastructure subject to change according to the purpose and needs of users, and they are open to new interpretation and social cultural processes. For intersectorial, they're also recognized for their intersectorial and interlocal interconnection. In a word, it is about community spaces that produce social good through direct democracy. If you want partnership, if we want to get out of the usual rhetoric, we will also allow ourselves to say that such hybrid institutions of this kind of partnership are houses of culture that have profound social and political influence in the democratic processes. Those who are producing participate in the management, production, and decision-making for programs are for those who produce them: organizations, artists, individuals, cultural workers, and the space and partly the funds, those related to the basic governance structure, are those who manage public resources. With this model of the institution, we will make an essential step forward in the cultural and political system. We all know that the public sector falls into a watercourse of tremendous immovable systems with a closed perspective on monitoring new management and programming practices. This is because the public sector is under the control of a single founder, which in fact means that it is under the control of the government. Therefore, we insist on a partnership between the local self-governance and JADRO, that is the organizations and individuals of the civic sector. Being aware that every institution is as good as the program it offers, we insist that Centar JADRO is not defined exclusively according to the aesthetic criteria, but also according to socially relevant topics, and is therefore not breached with sound programming, that program boundaries are dedicated to the mission of the organization and remain inclusive and never exclusive. And lastly, the content is multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, where contemporary culture and art, social cultural activities, work with communities, and encouraging a critical culture will be able to flourish and become core value of not only the space, but of our society as a whole. If we see the wider social context in almost all transition countries in which the retro-nationalistic concept is dominated, and in which the field of culture is marked mainly with political patriotic discourse, we will see that in the cultural field dominated by public institutions in culture, theaters, art museums, concert halls, etc., in which almost all public financial investments are directed. The justification of such investments in public institutions is not only reassessed, but also implicit. At the same time, these institutions, according to their formal and legal structures, are controlled by the authorities. They are not only financially dependent, which in itself is not so problematic, but their governing bodies are directly appointed by the government, thus establishing control over the organizational, the management, and consequently the program structure. Such a system and such practices result in uncritical acting and clientelist relationship, making culture closing in on itself, so to speak, denying itself the social responsibility and therefore the social influence it should and must have. For this reason, systematic issues of managing public institutions in culture, new models of management modes, hybrid models of civic-public partnership must be placed as a thorough issue of cultural policies. Thus, it is equally important to ask questions of cooperation at all levels, locally, nationally, regionally, internationally, between cultural and social activities, as well as with the issue of intersectorial cooperation, especially within the public and non-profit, that is the civic sector. With this position, we insist that culture should not be treated in isolation from other social strata, but rather completely immersed and even on the forefront of the social change. We can come to the conclusion that finding a legal way to secure a possibility of merging public sector interest and to insist on a legal frame that protects the initiative is its dependence in ways it programs and distributes content may be a good way forward and onward. Therefore, addressing this systematic issues of managing public institutions in culture will lead to finding the path to the new models and ways of governance that can be deployed instead. It is important to ask questions of how cooperation at all levels, local, national, regional, international, as well as the issue of intersectorial cooperation, especially within the public and non-profit, that is the civic sector, will help in this process, and we are ultimately, all of us, united in the effort to critically discuss and make a change. The independent cultural sector is the productive cultural power that maintains the interference cooperation between the public sector and the civic sector equally. So the independent cultural sector is the productive cultural power that maintains the interference cooperation between the public sector and the civic sector equally. And another extremely important role of the independent cultural sector is the negotiation through various models and formats, production, theoretical activists, with authorities related to the cultural and artistic activities, but also with wider social action. This is why it is extremely important that the independent cultural sector be treated as a separate field in terms of contemporary cultural policies, a separate segment, and as such to enter negotiations with other governmental agencies into greater visibility and also institutional sustainability. Is it already 20 minutes?
Yes, I'm afraid so. I'm afraid so. Yes.
I'm big read. Oh.
So hopefully we can integrate this into the debate that will follow later, or send us some input still of it, because it's been a bit time.
But maybe also, Jasmina, we can come tonight after 6 o'clock, 6:30, people who would like, and someone else also can talk there, and if you are not able, so people can also see the center, Jadro. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Using spaces in a destructive way, in a sort of sense, or to be able to deconstruct physically spaces and to be able to experiment, which is something maybe we cannot do with heritage or with other situations. And I'm really curious about what are, in a way, the policies or also the accessibility and safety and all these like legislation aspect, because you involve people, so I guess you have to be able to ensure certain security level and engagement processes. So I'm really curious about this.
So first of all, from the building in itself, we only accept temporary occupation contracts where we have full liberty on the building. So that means that we already in advance really know that we will not get in trouble if we deconstruct and reconstruct. That's for the more practical legal aspect, but on the building. And then so all our buildings are insured, all our activities are insured. We have a basic insurance for everything. So if there is an accident inside of the building, for that. It's really important to understand that so when we agree to a partner with a certain activity, we have firstly, we meet them, we see them a lot, and we very quickly know till what level we can trust or not trust, or we need to be careful on certain things. We really are there always in the buildings, and we live there, and so we have a very natural way of looking out for each other and for the space. So that's one thing. And if it's for example building with little kids, or if it's with the public or certain practices that can be dangerous, I mean, you always have the logistic team that explains all the tools that is going there, like is accompanying the things. We have like a two-stand academy. It's called kind of a school where we give basic workshops, like basic tools, basic plumbing, basic this, basic that, and all of our partners and everyone, not only the partners, but everybody can join. So you learn the basic things. We will not agree on a partner, for example, building a toilet if we are not sure he knows a basic ground of plumbing. But the partner will never want to build a toilet if he doesn't have a basic thing. Very naturally, they ask for help, and we give help, like organically, you know.
Yeah, I want to add on this that if one of the partners want to add or make a little closet or make a little table or whatever, we will explain how to do it with the logistics team, for example, the technical team, for example, to like really share knowledge and to make sure that next time he or she will be able to do it themselves and share their knowledge to the groups of people. So we will explain the safety rules, how you use it, do maybe the first part of the table together, look together and be there when the person finishes it, and the next time this person will be able to use the atelier, come to get the tools and do it him or herself.
Of course, with like such an experimental space, accidents happen. Sometimes we are not prudent enough, maybe, but that's why we constantly reevaluate. And if something happens, it will not happen the second time. because we know why it went wrong, and we know how we can react to the next time it will go on. So
sorry, I like a more specific question. So the buildings are usually public
yes.
owned by the municipality, and then the municipality is simply allowing you to use them with
yes.
a normal contract.
Yeah. So it's we have a regulation. It's called temporary occupation contracts. It's between squatting and a normal contract of renting. So it's an in-between. We have a lawyer, I mean, it doesn't work for us, but we have legal help with all of our contracts. We have very basic models of contracts we always use and we always impose. The buildings are 99% public. It can happen that there is a public-private partnership, but then we negotiate often with the public sector. And the insurance, it's we. Sometimes the building, the electricity and the water is paid by the public if they want to continue paying the electricity and the water. Sometimes it's we that we do a new contract with the electricity and water supplier. But we have 1 million turnover, you know, of money, of subsidies. We have quite a lot of money to be able to have an insurance for everybody, to be able to have workers, volunteers, physical people that are always there and care for those things. But yeah, it's a very specific type of contract with his own regulation, and it's actually toestand that also put it on the political agenda. So for a long time there was no specific regulation on temporary occupation. It was very much forced squatting, then negotiating through our projects, and also because we made a publication which is called Leegstand, which is really about temporary occupation, about use of empty spaces and about the empty spaces in Brussels, which had a lot of success, a lot of echo mediatically and politically. And the new government, which is center-left kindish, put it in the political agenda. From now on, empty spaces can be used for temporary occupations, and we need to facilitate that. So that happened during our whole organization, and we were the consultant civic parties of that legislation through the book and the publication we made.
Thank you all. Questions for the Brussels duo. I will try to be very, very fast. Since you try to you basically discover some abandoned places and the venues, buildings around the Brussels. Have you ever been in a situation that you basically increase the visibility of the abandoned venues, and that some private investor came after your intervention and, let's say, took the places or buy the places from the local authority and then influences the places in a way with gentrification? And in the case that it's happened already, did you concern in the future this kind of the actions? I'm asking and stress these questions because of some of Zagreb experiences of the independent cultural scene, who basically increased the visibility of the abandoned factory in the city center.
But you need to know that Brussels is already very fully and densely built and owned, and most of the land in itself has a project. So most of abandoned buildings, well, we never had the experience that an abandoned building didn't have a project with it, a building permit waiting, something which is already going to happen with this place. It's almost impossible to have an abandoned building for 20 years that is just there abandoned, because Brussels is so densely built and always looking for new parcels to build, and there is almost nothing that is not built anymore. That if a building is not used, it's because the owner has plans with it and just doesn't have the building permit yet, or that the municipality is still looking for funds to renovate or to this or that. So we never had the experience of arriving to a building that there is not a project in the next coming 6-7 years, and so it cannot be bought by a private, or it cannot be reused because there is already a project, and the whole thing of the temporary occupation is it's the only thing you can do in those buildings, waiting for the destruction of or the renovation, because the permit takes that much time until it's finished. They don't have the developers yet, and we wait. No?
Yeah, what Lea says, but then it radiates gentrification vibes. Certainly, I mean, this is reflection we do. We try to do. So very shortly at the end, it's like Ali Dukai, a big project. It has had an enormous effect for sure on this whole neighborhood. That is being like one of the biggest gentrifying projects, not called so, but almost. I mean, in Brussels. And if I'm correct, but I would have to check my sources, but I will still say it because I'm almost sure. Is like Ali Dukai. This building has been used in one of the brochures, like one of the selling information booklets to sell apartments on the other sides, like urban, and it's true, it would still be there when some of the apartments were already finished, which is now, but at the end, Ali Dukai will be destroyed for a park for this, and so it's like this Ali Dukai certainly totally helped I mean, it's super complex material.
Yeah, I mean, there is no there is a negative effect, there is a positive effect. The land on itself, like you asked, it's not that we make our buildings more attractive to private owners, but we make the neighborhoods more attractive. We make the general land, the price of the market in those neighborhoods, we make it go up by the fact that we are doing such cool things where there was nothing. Cool things, I mean, so much where there was nothing.
I have one question for them and one question for him, but they're very quick. Question for you. You were underlining, thank you very much for your presentation. You were underlining the needs and locations, so we're talking about, and you're very, very swift in responding to needs, and that's very admirable. But how do you detect the needs and the locations? I mean, how do you map the situation? Like you go in and you work, but how do you detect a need? That, like, do they find you? Do you find them? How is this mapping done? So that's for you. And Peter, for you, is that you show all the pictures and everything, and it's a very, very sort of nice story, but what you didn't show us is the organizational structure on who governs, how is it managed, who owns it, who pays the bills, who decides on what's the program and stuff. So there has to be a structure in a place. It doesn't necessarily have to reflect what's happening in Magazino Jadro or whatever, but it would be good to hear how this grassroots movement institutionalized itself or gained some kind of sort of organizational framework. Thank you.
What is your relation with the cultural institutions in the neighborhood?
In the beginning, we really just looked for, very honestly, for the perfect building. In the sense that most of the abandoned buildings were already in neighborhoods where there was a need for socio-cultural things. So that's always, we've been always to neighborhoods where they needed us, that's for sure. But we just looked, this building, we have less work to do because the walls are still there, it's clean, we have electricity plugs, so we'd go there. That was in the beginning, before the legislation. With the swift of legislation, now it's really about often the government do public announcement of who wants to temporarily occupy this building, and we write proposals. So we do proposals for different buildings, and they come to us often with, there is a monastery that is going to be empty for the 2 years. Do you want to engage in that monastery? And that's how it goes now. So now it's like I said, it's very...
Stop. Depression, stop. I'm gonna cry. Like anxiety levels are rising.
So it's easy, but it's also problematic. But like Carole said, it's also commercialized. Like it's also dangerous because it's not. Before it was really the squatting, very, very civil.
Now
they just go in, they take it. Now it's been trendified. It's being given to big organizations as us and not only the small ones. So there are a lot of problems which we are aware, and we redistribute all the time. When we don't want to, when we feel we have no, and we just say, oh, you local group, you want to do, let's go, do it. And we will write maybe the proposal, we will just give it to you, we will find a way to do it. So that's one. Cultural, it's a big discussion. We feel that in Brussels, most of the people in the cultural scene have enough money to be able to rent a little studio. It's not 100% like this. It's not it's not always like this, of course not. And there are organizations that give spaces to marginalized artists, precarious. But our mission is the social. It's very much social. So there are of course creative cultural inputs in our buildings, but we don't want to become free studios for artists. We don't, because we really don't want to privatize neither. So it's not, we don't want to privatize spaces to a cultural, and it's a public, it's a kind of group. When it's, for example, a guy of the neighborhood who wants to do a rap concert, that's cultural, he can do his rap concert.
I can add on that one.
Yeah.
It's like, as after this legislation, now temporary occupation is very popular. I have a feeling, or I think the government prefers giving these empty buildings to artists, because this will fancy up the neighborhood way more than social activities in it. And so Toestand really tries to have as actually these buildings to then redistribute to social other partners. So that's a bit the idea, that there's already a lot of space and a lot of facilitation for artists. We're not against it, but we're like, there's other places for you. So voilà.
And yeah, it's not about neither, like we talked about it a lot, we had a lot of discussions. It's, if the artists, if it's artists but that are doing things for the neighborhood, with the neighborhood, that are really in a very participative approach, of course they are welcome in our buildings. But if it's a collective that just wants space to organize a big party, and they don't have a link with the neighborhood, and they don't, then they're not welcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Should I address the? Yes. So thank you for the remark. I really didn't get much into this part. So the whole thing originated from the civic association Tupu Centrala, and the person at the center of this association, who is a theatrical director. He was the main sort of engine behind the whole enterprise, and he's now the director of the center Tupu Centrala. And we try to very much implement this the horizontal structure of direction of the center, because alongside.
Is it an organization or an institution?
Excuse me.
It's an enterprise.
It is like it. It is. The full name is Regional Center for Contemporary Art, which makes it a state-owned cultural center, basically. Yeah. That's it. And we have a board, an artistic board, who gets to decide like what we can have there, what we can have cannot have, and also we employ the like for specific types of arts and performances. We also have international experts on board, so they can like depending on the art, we can switch them up. So.
I appreciate that you constantly say we decide, we do, etc., etc. So I was wondering if you could, like, when you say you as like we, do you mean it's for Lea and Carole? Yeah, I was looking at you and I assumed that was obvious. But like, is it the organization? Do you have meetings with like your partners? So when you have to decide what to do, you know, who to include, etc. Is it also open to users of the space? You know, like is there a governance model that includes also others?
I will address my question to Peter from Toplo Centrala. I'm interested about the funding of the construction materials and stuff, because we are familiar that lots of donors are program oriented, not much as constructionally oriented. So where did you manage to get funds for those basic materials? Yeah, thank you.
I have a question for Toestand. You spoke about your experience in Brussels, but as I know, Two-Stand worked on Termokis in Pristina in Kosovo, and also in Uzuna in Tirana, and also I think in Tetovo in Macedonia. So can you tell a little bit of that experience here on the Balkans? Thank you.
The opportune moment came, as I said, 2014, because at that point the government recognized the need to really address the want of the independent scene, and so a budget was set aside for Tuput Centrala, for the project to be developed. Of course, there was difficulties. The budget was delayed. The funding was a little bit delayed. The project started later, but still the government set aside the money. So, and they said yes, we recognize this initiative as important for the development of our capital. And so we are happy to release the certain amount of funding, but yeah, obviously it was a state employed company who did the construction, and there are some problems with that as well. But that's more or less the story. Yeah.
Okay, I will try to be brief, but it's two big questions. So the governance model of Two-Stand. As everything we do, it's a constant work of progress, self-criticism, self-changing. Today, when I say we are constantly discussing everything, every step we make and everything we do. We, it's the organization, it's the partners, it's the people that are in the spaces. There is no hierarchy at all. There are different people that have different missions, and of course, the people that are doing those missions have more to say in certain projects than other ones. And there is a general coordinator that has a general view of all the projects, who of course also has an impact. We really had a big discussion 2 years ago about making it even more horizontal than we could be. There is an external organization that's called Lokomotiva, which is doing with us a parcours of the last year and a half of thinking together a model of how we can be more horizontal. That means that there is it goes to a model where there is a representative for every group imaginable, and they are spokesperson, their representative change all the time, and they are spokesperson for their group in decisions. That means that spokesperson for the volunteers, spokesperson for the partners, spokesperson for the project, spokesperson in the employees, spokespersons in everything, different thing we have. There is nothing that is not open for discussions, from budget, employing someone. I mean, it can really be a volunteer that comes and says, I think you don't need to do another project anymore, and it will be heard the same level as a general coordinator that says that they don't want to do a new project anymore. That's very, very important, I think, in our work. But of course, the people that spend most time have the most impact, because just their faces are recognized a lot, and people listen to them more, and that's just a natural way of things happening. But we try to always be very aware of that.
And it's very good that it's horizontal, but it's very good that there's a main coordinator to you,
yes,
who you can go with the big questions, and to remind you of I mean, I learned a lot of her. Is the doer decides, and hearing this a lot is okay, if I built this wall and I choose the color, I will decide because I'm doing it. And she's a bit, it's good that it's there, and it's as horizontal as everyone is doing the dishes. Everyone is cleaning sometimes. This is the horizontality, but I mean, voilà.
Yes. Yeah. And the international project, it's one. Yeah, we didn't mention it. It's one of Two-Stand's big project. It started very simply with just a love story of the founder of Two-Stand that met his girlfriend, which is from Kosovo, from Pristina. And we started, so Two-Stand today is also a big consultant. People from all over the world, they contact us to share our experience, to talk about how, who, and what happened with Balkan countries is, firstly, we love the way the buildings are made, all this. There is a big need of social cultural spaces, and it was just groups of citizens in the beginning. So our first project was in Grenada, not in the Balkans, but it's a group of people that contacted us, and they were like, we have an empty building, we don't know what to do with it, we don't know how to negotiate with the government, please come and help. So we went just with a truck full of stuff. It's an Erasmus Plus funded project, so it's European money. We go with, today, like the last project, we were almost 70, 80.
Yeah, 50 from Belgium.
50 from Belgium.
From the previous projects in this country.
And we go for 2 weeks, we build, it's the people that decide, again, the people from there that decide, so we are just there to support financially, and because it's true, if a Brussels organization comes and we have a meeting with local municipality here, for example, a lot of activist groups in Tirana, for example, in Albania, we had the case that the activist groups were asking for a building for years and years. We came in 2 days, we had a building. Yeah. Because we just went into a meeting and we have that European Brussels cachet of being just white people, and it's true, and it helps, and it's the reality, and that's what we are aware of that, and we try to really deconstruct the thing that, because there was a bit of not colonizing, but just coming with our knowledge and being with the big trucks and big people and all building and like it was very violent, the way we entered and we did the project. Never our choice of doing the project, although always the project wanted to be, like the people wanted this, they wanted us to come and be violent, but
there has been a big work on how we do it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've only participated in the last one, which was in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Sarajevo. So I only know this one, but I heard the stories of previous editions. And to me, this edition was like really, there has been taken a lot of time to think together and like really facilitating the people of there decide and being as deconstructed and de-imposing as possible, let's say. First edition with as much women and girls involved, even more than men, for example. And it was totally different in the beginning, so
and it's
not romanticizing it at all.
And it's a year of work, no? We do a year of prepared meetings with the local communities. We go on advanced meeting where we meet the local people. They look at us like, whoa, you have so much experience. Of course, they listen to us a lot, and they eat sometimes our words a bit too much or not. You know, it's questions that we need to ask, but we put an active work on making them as independent as possible, and all of the projects succeeded. Are now today social cultural projects that are still working with a local group. Sometimes the building is not there anymore because they could not sustain it, but in most cases the building is still there. In Pristina, it's the best example. It was really shit. Like there was nothing. We did everything like from the roof to the. And now today they have heated floors, they have a super new roof, they are super active, the government accept them totally, invest in that building, and voila, it became an independent, totally well-functioning, crazy organization with amazing, inspiring people. I would really advise you to go look at their model and how they work, because they're very unique in the way they function and very, very inspiring. And it's not how we function. So that's also very reassuring to see. It's that even if in the beginning they are inspired by us or they ask a lot of questions, none of the projects, international projects, how they are today, of those groups, none are our copies. It's everybody's own thing and own model of governance, and yeah, every year the project grows, because every year all projects where we did an international project, you're all welcome, by the way, to join international projects. It's always very nice, but everybody's invited. So, for example, this year it's in Brussels for the first time. People of all the Pristina, like Tirana, Tetova, Sarajevo, they're all coming to Brussels.
Okay, I mean, we have to close this dense session, but thank you all for all your input.